everybody, and welcome to GHI's webinar on winter operations. Are you ready? How are you all? I hope you're well, and I hope that you're seeing increasing numbers of aircraft since we last spoke returning to your stations. Be great to hear some, and we certainly have heard some positive signs of returning volumes, which is terrific to hear, and long may it continue. Winter's coming, and it's hard to believe because, again, we've picked one of the hottest days of the year here in England. It is 26 degrees outside my window, and it's very hard to imagine that biting easterly wind coming down from the North Pole, as it soon will in the next couple of months. But I'm going to try and visualise, obviously, for today's topic area, the onset of winter. I've got my winter gloves. I've got my beanie hat, just to get in the spirit of things as we're talking today. But on a serious note, as we well know, living at this latitude, winter comes on very quickly, and it will be here all of a sudden. And it's going to be a very challenging winter this year, particularly interesting with the onset of the coronavirus pandemic. Very much like to get the views of our panelists here today on what that will mean, both in terms of equipment design, process activity around the aircraft during de-icing, and also, I guess, in terms of the philosophy and the dynamics between stakeholders, because there will be a huge amount of and pressure and scrutiny around resources this winter as operators look to maximise their resource, get aircraft up and running, and control cash at every stage. So it's set to be a fascinating winter. We'll come on to some of those topics during the session. Some housekeeping before we start. Very much like to thank Wiseleap, our headline sponsor, for supporting the webinar here today. Thank you to Peter and the team. And we look forward, there we are, we look forward to hearing from Peter in a little while. Wiseleap, aviation cloud applications provider with software around de-icing, as Peter will go on to talk about, I'm sure. We want your questions, so please, if it's the first time you've been on or you're not familiar with it, there is a little Q&A icon at the bottom of your screens. If you hover over that and click, you can submit questions throughout. We're going to have 4 mini presentations, but please submit the questions as we're going along so you don't forget them. They'll come up on my screen and you can vote for them. So if you like a particular question and you want it asked, then just vote for it and it will rise up the league table on my screen, and I'll ask those ones first. I'll do my best to get through everything, but I suspect I won't get to all the questions. If I don't get to your question, I can ask it of our panel after the session and get you an answer. Just chase me up on email and I'll make sure we get you an answer and come back to you later on. And then I'm going to flip that on its head and say that I will also ask you a question. We have a poll set up, and at some point in the next hour or so, we will ask you to vote on that poll. And if the technology holds up, which hopefully will, we'll get a live result. So if you can vote at that point for your chosen answer, that would be great. Okay, I'm now going to introduce our panelists. We're joined today here by, we've got Peter Hansen, who I mentioned a second ago, who's the Vice President Sales at Wiseleap. Welcome, Peter.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning, or good afternoon for me. We also have Wazeek Mia, who is Senior Director, de-icing Operations Compliance Support at Prime Flight Aviation Services. Welcome, Wazeek.
Thanks, Max, for having me. Good morning and good afternoon, where you are at.
Excellent stuff. And then we have Liam Bolger, who is Head of Airside Operations at London Luton Airport. Welcome, Liam.
Hey, Max. Thanks for inviting me.
First airport representative on our webinars. No pressure. And we're also delighted to have Justin van den Oosten, who is Ground Operations Quality and Safety Specialist at EasyJet. Welcome to Justin.
Hello. Thank you very much.
And the 4 main names that I mentioned, all of those guys are going to deliver a short presentation. We'll then also going to hear during the Q&A and the open floor debate from our next 2 panelists. I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Sarah Flaherty, Director of Lux Consulting, and a familiar face to many of you who've been to GHI events. Welcome, Sarah.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Pleasure. And we are also joined by Peter Hawke, who is Sales Manager, North American Operations at Vestergaard. Welcome, Peter.
Morning, and thank you.
So, as you probably detected from the accents, we have the 2 Peters and Wazeek representing North America, and the rest of our panelists will give a European perspective today. We've got the 4 10-minute mini presentations, and then I'm going to bring Sarah and Peter in on a couple of specialist topics, and we will take your questions. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, Peter Hansen of Wiseleap, for the first presentation. Over to you, Peter.
Okay, well, thank you again, Max. Really excited to be here today. We're all in the same situation. It's kind of odd speaking about winter when the weather's so beautiful and nice outside. But the reality is, we all know it's coming. I'm excited to be able to take a little bit of time to just talk about winter operations. So, like Max said, I like the theme. When we first spoke about this webinar, the idea of are you ready for winter operations? And so, next slide. So that's basically a very good question. The reality is, are you ready for this? We know it's coming. It's not something we necessarily look forward to, unless you're into skiing or any kind of winter sports. However, it is a reality, and especially for the Northern Hemisphere, it's coming a lot sooner than personally I would like to, think, but it's coming. Next slide. So, are we ready for winter operations? The question on my mind, the thing I really want to focus on is, why is that such an important question? And when we think of some of the major or key considerations, obviously it has an impact on operations, it has an impact on safety, it has an impact on just the seasonal preparation within the aviation industry. And it has it involves a lot of different stakeholders. Operations, obviously, when you think of winter operations, one thing I recognized through my experience, and I've been within aviation over 40 years, more than 25 years focused on de-icing operations, both from a airline perspective and a service provider perspective. And now my focus obviously is software platforms related to supporting winter operations. But really, winter operations present a significant challenge to airline operations. We know that there are many different impacts, whether it's thunderstorms or high winds or fog conditions, but definitely winter operations are a significant challenge, when it comes to winter operations. Another factor too is safety. Winter operations really can have a significant impact on safety, and the key, of course, to be ready is mission critical for flight safety. Preparations, it takes every year, we know it's coming. Winter operations take a lot of preparation, really, because it's needed to mitigate the impact to the operation on a daily and hourly basis. In addition, getting ready for winter operations, I'd say one of the key factors is the complexity of it. More so from the perspective that when it comes to getting ready, it's not just an airline, it's an airline, an airport, it's many stakeholders, service providers. There's a lot going on that, where everyone has to, do their part, come together and synchronize every detail of what they're going to do to make sure that, again, it's done safely, the operation runs as smoothly as possible. Next slide. So, in addition, and Max touched on that in his introduction, not only are we getting ready for winter because of its complexity and so on, but in addition, now we've got a new challenge on the horizon. We're in the middle of it, and that has to do with the COVID pandemic. Now we have other things to, in addition to all the other things we do to get ready for winter operations, now we have to take steps to ensure, that we're, doing things like ensuring social distancing, that we're doing all the right things to ensure that we're able to manage effectively in the midst of the pandemic. Things like keeping ground staff trained, ensuring that we're able to meet every obstacle that comes our way in light of the COVID-19. So I think this year is going to be very interesting, and certainly there will be a lot of different areas that will be new. Again, from a that's my phone, unfortunately. That will be new that we're going to face this coming season. Next slide. So, what is key? What I believe is key to readiness related to that is going to be, digitization to me is going to be the key. Typically, and I say that because not only because I'm working for a company that provides these platforms, but based on my experience, typically over the years, up until I would say the last 5 years, a lot of the processes when it comes to winter operations has been managed manually, and what we've seen is that this has become inefficient. And of course, is subject, to any kind of human factors that, might be, might occur. Other reasons that it's key, well, it provides us with a greater degree of visibility and a greater degree of transparency when it comes to not just only at a local perspective, but even from a operational perspective, having a good snapshot of what is going on, and also being able to make decisions that will positively affect the operation from day to day. It's key also because it provides digital decision making, that is AI. So now with all the data that can be captured through digitization, it provides a good source of information that on an ongoing basis, we can make intelligent decisions based upon, real time and good data. Another key, of course, and to me, I believe that's one that is most appealing to all the stakeholders within the aviation industry, is that it provides an opportunity to achieve improved efficiency and profitability. Next slide. And that is one, there some of the examples of where that, where the efficiencies are achieved are optimizing glycol usage, providing shorter time on the ground for the aircraft, less delays, less operational impact downline, and less penalties. Obviously, of course, it also improves the bottom line. For a variety of reasons. Again, reducing the time of aircraft on ground, improving, cost efficiency achieved through reducing the amount of glycol used, and other things like invoicing that can be sent in minutes versus days or weeks. Next slide. So this is something we do. And this is something I felt I wanted to focus on only because historically things have been done manually, or processes have been managed manually. Now we have an opportunity, to streamline operations and achieve the efficiencies that are for the benefit of all. Next slide. So that's all I have, to give at this time. I wanted to keep it as brief as possible, and certainly look forward to any questions, when the opportunity is there to answer your questions.
Thank you, Peter. Bang on time. Well done.
Sure.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to hand over to our second presentation, which is Wazik Mia. Wazik, I will hopefully bring you on screen and we can hear from you. Just as Peter says, you can leave questions as we go along in the Q&A forum, and We'll get to those later. Should be at the bottom of your screen, a little speech bubble. So type those in if there's anything that comes up during the presentations. I'll hand over to you, Wazik.
Thanks, Max, and Peter. Appreciate the presentation as well. Just like any other norm, in this industry, for us, doesn't matter if it's a service company or the airlines or terminals. I think we're all in the same boat, and this is something that's definitely new to the industry. Reality started hit me when I was flying back from Seattle to New York in the end of March, when I was the only one on that flight, on that 6-hour flight back to New York. And it just hit me that this is going to be the new norm for at least the next couple of months when this was all starting. So kind of thought about it, and we right away got with our compliance and safety folks, and wanted to make sure that, hey, how are we gonna deal with this, and how are we going to go forward, dealing with this as well. So I just wanted to kind of touch base on the presentation that I came up with. So this presentation is for the hands-on face-to-face training, but I wanted to touch on the other stuff. So what we did this year, a lot of the stuff I think a lot of the airlines and the service companies are doing this year is virtual training. And Peter touched upon it just a little bit on the on how different this pandemic is going to be, and how different going forward this industry is going to be. So we kind of contemplated on doing the virtual training. We had a couple of sessions. So the virtual training basically works well if you have recurrent folks coming back, but if you have someone brand new, and you need to sell a product or have them be familiar to a product or service, we still need that face-to-face interaction. And this is what the presentation that I was going to forward, how our classroom setting and OJT training is going to be for the winter operation. One second. All right, so we came up with this training based on the CDC guidelines and recommendation. This slide is actually about 40 slides long, but I spoke to GHI and they wanted to kind of condense it. So I highlighted the couple of focal points, and this is still being, as we speak right now, our compliance and safety folks are still working on this, and it's a pending approval from our VP of safety. So this infectious and disease is changing, by the day. So every time we get new updates from the CDC, from other organizations, and we're adapting to these new changes as they come along. So what is COVID-19? I think everyone in this webinar and everyone across the globe knows COVID-19 because of the nonstop media coverage, social media coverage. Funny story, the other day, I was at my sister's house and I sneezed. Even the cat ran away across from me, and I was like, wow, even our little furry little pets, are aware what this, COVID-19 is. So I don't need to highlight. I just came up with a couple of bullet points. It's an illness caused by a virus that can spread person to person. It can range from mild to no symptoms to severe illness. And effectively, it affects people that have pre-existing medical conditions and folks at a older age as well. And the virus is more rapidly than to others as well. So I just wanted to kind of put that in that perspective. Preventing practices. So prevent the spread of COVID-19. So what we're doing at Prime Flight is that ensuring that when we have a training session, we're wiping down all furniture, objects that will be used for the time period, pre-screening employees' temperature by using a thermometer, infrared, or ear forehead. This is a big thing for us, ensuring that before we have any type of, a face-to-face interaction, we're actually, taking that precaution stuff on assuming that, hey, if anyone comes along, we're going to do these practices. Provide disinfectant tissue nearby, maintain the 6 feet separation, and regularly monitoring our employees. The classroom guidelines. So this is, like I said, the virtual training is done, by CBT. It's been very successful for our recurrent folks, but we still have to have a classroom session. So usually for our organization system-wide, our classroom is set to about 25 on each location. What we did, we cut that more than half. So there's maximum of 8 person per session, And prior to the classroom start, our instructors and trainers have to ensure that they wipe down everything. One other thing we added is that we're placing polyurethane bags on chairs and chairs with each training session. I spoke about pre-screening of each individual coming in, and ensuring employees sit on the adjacent edge of the table, maintaining the 6 feet separation. One thing that we didn't go that far is that, like other organizations, they're actually conducting the COVID test, and so you would have to have a negative test prior to, ensuring that you could be involved in taking any type of classroom work. But we haven't got that far yet with this organization. Fieldwork, that's the OJT, regardless of virtual, the OJT has to be hands-on. So what we're doing as per one instructor, we're limiting that OJT to 3 people for one instructor. And we're doing the same thing, wiping down all equipment, the ice truck services, object that will be used for that day. We require the use of mask or closed face covering, pre-screening employees, that's a biggie, and outflow trucks to limit spread. If you can see the picture, you'll see that, we have actually a separation. You could use a plastic or vinyl separation between the driver or the cab operator. A lot of our stations do have dual truck operation. It does help if you have a one-man truck operation where you limit the exposure, but companies that do have dual truck operation, dual person operation, it's very key that you have that separation between the operator and the driver. So the PPE, besides the other safety PPE addition, we're also supplying antibacterial soap, sanitizers, wipes, protective face shield, and face masks. So these are things are added on top of our other PPE on every trucks. So every trucks will have these type of PPE and safety adjective, be available for all our employees. And I think it kind of does make sense to provide that for our employees to limit the exposure as well. All right, so if an employee's showing any symptoms, so it's common when you have any employee showing fever, cough, sore throat, or fatigue. These are much of the common theme for COVID-19, and we just have to ensure that we actually are aware what the symptoms are, and then when we do identify it, we ensure that this person has been quarantined, and we make the right proper formality to ensure that all it's documented and going forward that we have it's communicated throughout the sector of our organization as well. Preventing transmission. So like I said, this virus mainly spreads by droplets creating when they talk, cough, and sneeze. So to prevent spread, ensuring employees are properly wearing masks at all times. Ask employees to maintain a 6 feet separation. Encourage the use of cloth or tissue to cover sneeze and using a sealed plastic bags or disposable tissue. So all of our equipment and all of our classrooms are going to have these specialized sealed bags that it's going to be for every personnel. And once they have any type of napkins or any type of unused thing, they could throw that at that sealed napkin, and we have a regulated garbage area where they could dispose that as well. Enforcing good practices. So this is kind of an eyesore to a lot of people because, like I said, we're in 54 different cities and different states have different regulations. But as a private company and private organization, we do have the right to ensure the safety of all of our employees. So when we're in large groups and we're advising our employees to ensure that they're wearing masks, and if they're not wearing masks, a verbal warning does goes up, and the second time the individual is written up. But if the employee continues to disobey the mandate, they will be sent home or further disciplinary action will be taken. So it's kind of like on a fine line of having a disciplinary action, but this is something that we're still working on. Like I said, this varies on state to state, and different states have different regulations, in the U.S. and North America. But as a private company, we do have the right to enforce strict safety contingency. The number one thing is maintaining good hygiene. Now, touching the contaminated object puts the infected droplets onto your hand when you enter your nose, eye, mouth, or throat to measure. So what we did is that we have this placarded everywhere in our facility. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water, minimum 20 seconds. So we have the soap, water, scrub, rinse placard. That's pretty much everywhere in our facility. The use of sanitizer, alcohol, if soap is not present, accessible. So we have that. So every facility you go to, every private facility you go to, regardless if it's a GSE shop or a fuel city or ground handling station or de-icing station, we have in each of our corridor, we have the necessary safety items to ensure that our employees are have less exposure, and ensuring given all the proper PPE required. The number one thing that I think comes out of this is mental well-being. So we have to keep in mind that that these warning signs, a lot of employees, when they come back to work from furloughs or feeling stress of changing environment, usually we have to recognize it. So our instructors or our trainers are the front line defense, for that. So when they see, when they have a classroom, we have a new folks coming in, or we have recurrent folks coming in, we have to see the characteristics or the future of someone coming in and identifying their situational awareness, like fatigue, shortage of essential items, lack of concentration, nervousness or anxiety, increased anger, aggression, or sadness. These are the things that we see a lot in our organization and others as well. Employees that are kind of in that COVID situation. Because it is nerve-wracking, and especially the media and the social platform does not kind of help either. So we try to ensure that our employees that, hey, you're not alone. So we have responsibility to our employees to perform the job safely, and their mental state doesn't affect their ability to do a job. So, you can take breaks, have one-on-one dialogue, practice positive thinking, and engage in activities that you enjoy. So we bring in a lot of positive overview on top of that. Of another layer of ensuring that our employees have that thought out process when it comes to their mental well-being. And that's pretty much it from the classroom perspective, Max. And I could definitely answer more questions, but like I said, with the ground handling side, it's more of virtual and hands-on. So we actually have both in our consents, and I know a lot of the organization that are on the same process as we are will do the similar transition, ensuring that the safety of our frontline staff and management is our overall consents going forward. And this is going to be the new norm. We see that this is going to be for the next couple of years. This is how it's going to be, and we have to adapt to the changes, and we'll ensure that our frontline folks, our customers, get these changes as we adapt on.
Thank you very much, Razik. We had a couple of questions. We'll get to those a little later on, but thank you for now. And I'll hand over to Liam Bolger at London Luton Airport. Over to you, Liam.
Thanks, Max. And
there we go. Yep.
Thanks, Max. And again, thanks for the invite along. I didn't realize we were your first airport. Before I just get into the presentation, Luton has the largest remote engines running de-icing facility in the UK, and one of the largest in Europe. And it didn't happen by chance. Back in 2012, we were wondering if we would ever be capable of doing remote de-icing at all. And sort of working with other partners, we finally got there. But I'll run through these slides and show you just exactly what we did. So you go to the next slide. So these are some of the challenges that face industry. I'm not going to go through every one of them, but anybody at an airport now that's doing any sort of development, which I think most of us are, will be guided by environmental conditions. And every time you go in for planning, they become more restrictive. Certainly focus a lot on surface water, but these sort of challenges here won't be unfamiliar to you or anybody else. Next slide. So these were challenges specific to us at LLA, and we started back in 2012, but this is where we were at back then. We were all stands de-icing, so we'd a lot of congestion around stands with other equipment, and it just really slowed the guys down trying to get around an airplane. And we definitely had a lot of delays in frost and cancellations and snow. In fact, with the new slot coordination and stuff like that, even in frost, it was becoming a challenge because aircraft would miss slots and have to be retreated. So a very slow process. The other big effect for us, glycol contamination. So at Luton, 90% of passengers walk to and from the aircraft. You have anybody spraying type 4 will know what I'm talking about, but it's really slippery, even for vehicles, and it was an absolute nightmare for us with passengers as well. and of course then surface water contamination. And I think, you know, the other challenges were really lack of education surrounding glycol application, and we had a pricing model that supported higher volume application than is actually needed. So very fitting that we had 2 North American colleagues go on first, because we actually learned quite a lot from colleagues in North America. Next slide. So in 2012, we were approached by EasyJet, and this was really the start of collaboration on remote de-icing and introducing new technology. So this technology was brought to us by a company called IDS, Integrated De-icing Services, and they were American-based, but they brought over a rig that was forced air blend to temperature. At that time, I hadn't got a clue what they were talking about, but when I saw the rig in action, I just knew what it was doing made sense. And I think EasyJet were just the same. We just stood there, looked at it and said, wow, that's the way we need to go. And we did. In fairness, you know, EasyJet put their foot in the gas and went ahead and brought this to Luton in the following winter. So some of the problems we had was gaining acceptance from flight crews on the reduction in volume of glycol applied. So for the first couple of winters, that didn't happen because what was in the manual is what the crews wanted. And nobody was prepared to take the chance on reducing the volumes, even though in North America, it would be very common to blend to temperature, but not in the UK. So it took a couple of seasons to get that in. And, you know, there was a lot of pressure from the airlines and from the airport as well, to be fair, to improve performance in de-icing, frost and snow. And of course, need to protect passengers, and certainly without a doubt to improve environmental performance. Next slide. So we couldn't do this on our own, and this involved quite a number of actors, airline, airport, construction. We had everybody involved in this, and the de-icing companies themselves. Next slide. So we searched the airport for a place. We finally found a spot where we could trial remote de-icing. So again, North America, very common to them to do remote pads, engines running de-icing, you know, and we had IDS, so we started the trial with them and EasyJet to look at how we might manage that at Luton. So that started 2014. We drove around for a long time before we actually found a place to do it. We drove past it for 18 months. We finally got there. Then in winter 2014-15, we introduced, you know, collecting and disposal of runoff glycol. It was a huge contaminant on the airfield, and when an aircraft was sprayed, everybody just drove away and just left us looking at puddles of glycol. So we introduced, you know, we got the sprayers to collaborate on that and come up with a scheme to collect it and dispose of it. So we went on then to deal with congestion problems on stand. So we introduced, eventually we introduced the pooling of equipment. I think we're the first airport globally to have done it to the scale that it's been done. I think a lot of airports do little bits of it, but on our next pooling agreement, it will be nearly everything that a ground handler has to use will be shared at Luton, at least where it makes economic sense to do that. And then we got into 2017-18, so where we had the 2-spot pad, we extended either side, and it allowed for 3 independent A321 de-icing spots. So across 2 pads, we have 7 independent spots, so we can service 7 aircraft at one time. But this, again, this was all collaboration between IDS, ourselves, EasyJet, finally bringing in Wizz Air, and Wizz and EasyJet started to collaborate. They collaborated on the amount of rigs that they had between them. So they sort of went into a kind of a little bit of a pooling agreement of their own, so that they could up the number of de-icing rigs at Luton to serve their aircraft better and more efficiently, because they were suffering. They were still suffering, even though we had this technology, they were still suffering with delays because they just didn't have enough rigs. They're a huge investment. So we finally, for winter 1920, we opened Foxtrot. That gave us 4 additional spots. And we did some trials there again. And a lot of this, was helped by, one of our construction firms, Rybridge. They helped out and getting us to understand how we could make these things work. The south apron was done with paint, believe it or not. And when we built Foxtrot, we built it deliberately, putting roads at either side of it. It was an additional taxiway we were putting in to improve ground movements. And we said, look, why not make it so that we can actually de-ice on it? So we've sealed the drainage. We put roadways in around it so that the rigs could move around, and we can easily get 4 rigs per aircraft. We've got 4 spots there. Next slide. So this is what the airfield looked like in 2012. And, we drove around for about 18 months, as I said, looking to understand where could we possibly do remote de-icing. And we came up with the south apron, and it was completely by chance. Don't know if you can show us the south apron there. Yeah, that's it there. That piece of concrete there became our first remote de-icing pad. And we had all sorts of people come to the airport, and nobody could figure out how we do it. And we just felt we wouldn't get there because the investment would be too big. And I was actually on the airfield one day when it was an EasyJet actually that got a slot. And that area had been empty. There was no aircraft on it. And Tower called out looking to remote park the aircraft until it could refly. And I took it in there. And when I took it in and pointed it back out again, and when I had a look, I thought I'd get 2 aircraft in here. And that's how the pad came around. It didn't come about because we figured it all out. It was just really by chance. And that now takes the 3 aircraft, that area. Next slide. That's what it looks like today. And as you can see, the blue markings on that drawing there are where we bring the aircraft in and we oversteer them. So we get them straight quicker on the center line that we drew in. So that's how it works. It costs us a couple of tins of blue paint, and we marshal the aircraft in and out. IDS have now introduced boards and stuff like that, illuminated boards for bringing the aircraft to a stop and letting it back out again. But before that, it was just all marshalers. So we were able to do that, and actually it didn't cost us anything really in terms of investment. When we extended the south apron, it went from a 4-stand apron to a 6-stand apron, so we benefited that way as well. Next slide. And this is Foxtrot. That was opened just for last winter, and that's what it looks like. It ties onto Delta Taxiway, but we just took advantage of the fact that we were going to build it anyway, and we just built a roadway either side of the actual taxiway so that the rigs could go up and down and between aircraft. And that's worked really well. We worked that in a figure of 8. So if an aircraft on F4 is done and wants to get out, it can get out through F3. So it can go about its business. The next one can move forward, and another one brought in. So it works. We had a goal last year. We had the mildest winter ever, so it wasn't really done in earnest. But what we did do was, we were able to see that the possibility. And when we put 4 rigs to an aircraft on that pad, we were just talking minutes to have that ready to go. So it really, really reduced time a lot. And I'm very excited, into the future to see how well we can do in that pad. Next slide. So really, this is the benefits of collaboration. This is the one slide here that's probably, for me, the most important. So we wouldn't have achieved anything really without us all working together. And I think, that stands true for everything we've done, equipment pooling and remote de-icing. So we went from believing, gosh, we'll never do this, to actually being one of the largest remote de-icing facilities in the UK. So if you look at this table here, we start at product liters. The winters from 2006-07 through to 2009-10, we sprayed. This is what we sprayed in product liters. So it was 1.4 million liters, say, just for ease. And you can see that if we go down to the winter periods for 2014-15 to 2017-18, we didn't spray quite as much. If I take you to the very end column and just go down to the bottom of that, you'll see that ATMs over them 2 periods increased by 31%. So here we are, we're using less fluid for more aircraft, which is a real, and the only thing that's really changed here is that we introduced this new technology at the time from North America. So we hadn't seen it before. I wasn't aware of it, but here was the benefit. So the average percentage change in product liters is about nearly 43%. And that's not, and we only have the one company using forced air blended temperature, which is IDS. They do spray 80% of the traffic. So, but you can imagine that we'd have no bother smashing the 50% mark if it was all forced air, which would be the longer term plan. The number of aircraft de-icing events, well, if you look here, you can see that the average here has dropped considerably, given that we're down 4.8% on the number of airframes de-iced against a 31% increase in ATMs. And that's because the mechanism for charging for that IDS use is different to what other providers were using. So it was always price per litre up until we introduced this forced air blended temperature, because you're now buying an insurance and you're paying for an airframe, and actually it's of no advantage to IDS to spray more often. And in fact, it's better for them to get it right and spray less. And that's the charging mechanism. So here we are, we've increased by 31% and we're spraying 5% less airframes over those periods. We go to the next column, the average application liters. We see that the average in the early years was 225.5 liters per spray. That was per airframe. And we're down to 126.25 now. That's where we're at. So a 44% reduction in the amount of liters used per airframe sprayed at Luton. And the next column, you can see here that the average amount of fluid sprayed per airframe through these winters was a total, it was 4,071, but the highest one was at 7,075 liters. And then if you go down the next column, you can see that the highest was 4,640 liters, with the average then being 2,489. So that's again nearly a 39% reduction. So that's really where we got to, and none of that would have been achieved had we not all worked together towards the same end. So I certainly wasn't an expert in aircraft de-icing, but there was enough of those around. And certainly when the guys turned up from North America, there was enough of us around then to know that there was something we could learn. And I wouldn't have imagined these benefits that I'm showing you today at the very beginning of this process. But I think, when you look at something and it makes perfect sense, then generally it does make perfect sense. And that's the route that we follow. But, in all fairness, we see now EasyJet and Wizz collaborating, and we would hope that more people would join that pool and collaborate even more so that, it becomes even more efficient as we go along. And that's really the end of the slides, I think.
Thank you, Liam. Thank you. Collaboration, we keep hearing about it, and some real tangible benefits there. Thank you. Very interesting slides. There are some questions that have come in, and we'll get to those very shortly. And I'm just going to hand over now to Justin for our final presentation. Over to you, Justin.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Hope you can see my screen. Right. So at EasyJet, so I'm here today to talk about how we as an airline improve de-icing performance by actually working together with all stakeholders. So let me get the first slide. So first of all, to introduce ourselves, who are we actually? So we're the second largest low-cost airline in Europe. We've got 29 base airports across UK and Europe, with currently about 350 aircraft in our fleet. In total, we've got approximately 100 cold weather stations and using about 40 de-icing service providers across our network. In total, we have approximately 22,000 de-icing events every year across our network. And obviously, as you can imagine, the yearly de-icing costs runs into the various millions of dollars or pounds. So then I'd like to talk to you about planning and preparation. So my main question to everyone connected who's involved in winter operations would be, have you actually started yet? And if not, you might actually be too late for it. So the planning and preparation is absolutely key. And I think that communications is one of the key aspects when planning and preparing for the next winter season. So for ourselves, this consists of, first of all, internal departments. So you're looking at flight operations, engineering, OCC, so Operations Control Center. But then obviously there's more than just internal departments. It basically lies in also the hands of the external parties. We're looking at airports, de-icing providers, equipment manufacturers, fluid manufacturers, and even up to civil aviation authorities. And these communications are obviously not merely just in terms of preparations. This counts during the entire winter season, and actually up to the review after the actual winter season, and that actually runs into the preparation of the next season. So it's the full cycles of preparing and reviewing the winter season. That's really important. Robust snow plans. So of course we expect airports to have snow plans in place, which should obviously be appropriate to the airport and their anticipated climatic conditions. So it's really critical that we as an airline work together with these airports to ensure that their snow plans are reviewed, first of all, updated when necessary, and tested. It's really important that airports do tabletop exercises and make sure that all parties are actually involved. And after doing these tabletop exercises, making sure that these are actually reviewed. And then after the winter season, the whole cycle starts again. In these snow plans, it's obviously very important that everyone has a clear understanding of their roles and responsibilities, and that everyone agrees on an activation plan that both airlines and service providers are aware of. And making sure that things like contact details, etc., are up to date and distributed to everyone, and accessible when necessary. So then about fluid supply chain and bulk storage. So we as an airline work very actively together with key fluid suppliers and other de-icing service providers, technically to ensure that there's sufficient stock available on the stations. Obviously, this counts for both before and during the winter season, and obviously additionally on those critical moments when the weather hits us. And then finally about resources. So it's absolutely critical that that we plan very early in advance, and we as an airline do our best to provide our de-icing suppliers with schedule information of the winter season as early as possible before the winter season starts. We want to obviously make sure that our de-icing service providers are recruiting the sufficient amount of staff, but also have the time to train these properly before the winter season starts. So again, sharing our resources with those suppliers is very important. Then the one team approach. So teamwork makes the dream work, let's say. So let's be fair, we're in it together to make the operation in the winter work. So it's really important that we work together and that there's absolutely no hidden information or messages between ourselves. We really strive as a company for open and upfront communications, really. And as I said before, this includes all the stakeholders in the conversation. de-icing service providers, food manufacturers, up to national aviation authorities like CEAs. And in addition, also the weather officers. So we work very closely with the UK Met Office, who has a representative in our operational control center during the winter season, who can actively advise us and the network duty manager about the current weather situation. So that's really critical tool for us to have. So then on to technology and innovation. So as Liam said before, we really are a true believer in the advantages of remote de-icing pads. So as you all know, traditionally an aircraft would stand at the parking, wait after the ground handling was complete, and then perform the necessary treatments. But obviously parking stands need to be big enough for equipment to maneuver freely around the aircraft, which is sometimes a real struggle if you understand, with GSE being in the way. So I think that with using remote pads, it really allows maximum flexibility as to where de-icing and anti-icing can take place, and can actually be very close or on the way to the departure runway. So with obviously Liam has stolen my text in terms of the work that's been done on Luton, but that's fair credit to him as well. So yeah, in addition to the work that's been done in Luton, at the moment at Gatwick we have even double remote pads on the taxiway. And in Manchester we've introduced last winter the first remote de-icing pads thanks to Manchester Airport and Menzies. So that's a really good step ahead, and that's the photo that you see on the right hand top. That was one of the first trials that took place in Manchester last fall. And then in terms of timing, so actually setting up a remote de-icing pad doesn't need to take a lot of time. Actually in Southend we just managed to do it in 6 weeks time. So it really proves the point that if everyone wants to, and actually everyone works together, it can be really achieved in a reasonably short time frame, and that it can actually work. So then on to further technology that we use across a network. So Liam briefly introduced it earlier as well, the signage, digital signage that we have on the remote de-icing pads in a few stations. Which is the Frostbuster of DHSL. So this really is a really good communication tool. So as you know, communication is really essential on those remote pads, and this visual communication aid really helps us in providing information to the flight deck about the status of de-icing and the actions that they need to take. And it really proves to be very efficient, and we get really great feedback from our crews about how this works. And also from DHSL that we use across a network is the so-called Frostbuster. So this is something that we use as a tool for local area defrosting, which is ideal for warmer weather stations where you have the occasional frosty mornings during the winter period. So we're talking about Middle Italy, Cyprus even, where we have these devices in place. So where previously you were waiting for the sun to come up to actually defrost the aircraft, now we as an airline have 100% OTP on our first wave flights, while other airlines are waiting for the sun to melt the frost away, let's say. So this is a really good tool to see. So yeah, as you can see, this is the Signbuster, and this is the Frostbuster, who uses Type 1 fluid. And then pulling off equipment. So obviously Liam has introduced that already, so I won't mention too much about that. So then moving on, in terms of technology and innovation, we work very closely with a company called Apturia, who actually are in place across 28 airports across the UK and Europe, actually providing us with the tools to make our oversight as an airline, and obviously those that of our service providers, more efficient and improve the oversight. So from an airline perspective, we really benefited in terms of the fluid usage that is spread on our aircraft. So it's really getting that consistent management of de-icing fluid usage on our aircraft, which we can also monitor in these tools. It's also ACDM proof, which is really good, which is really helpful for those stations in our network where ACDM is in place. And actually, from a cost perspective, it really reduces the chance of having discrepancies on invoices. So it really helps us to measure performance as well, and get improved reporting on what's happening in certain airports of our network. So we're really working together with airports and de-icing service providers to get this tool implemented in their operation. And then in terms of fluids reclamation and recycling, so we as EasyJet, we're part of the UK Glycol Reclamation and Recovery Working Group, which I would say is basically another excellent example of stakeholder collaboration, where we discuss how we can actually move forward in improving environmental conditions at our airports, how we can improve reclamation of glycol, etc. So we're working very much together. Liam at Luton is part of it, who kindly hosted the last meeting. And we're actually working with fluid suppliers like Kilfrost, Clariant, all UK major airports, service providers like Inland IDS, and some external expert companies. So then if we move on to the next one. So then in terms of our sharing our passion, let's say. So of course we, at least I can speak from my side, I like what I do, and I'd like to share things with other persons. So in terms of winter readiness, we organize on a yearly basis a so-called Winter Readiness Conference, which I think is another example of the community approach, where we invite over 200 attendees from across Europe and also the North America, where we actually talk about how we prepare ourselves for the winter, where different parties deliver presentations. We've got an exhibition area, and as I said before, it's a really good opportunity to network as well. So yeah, hopefully, and usually it's organized between in the end of June, starting on July. So normally our organization is, we have to take into account that we organize these conferences on the hottest day of the year. So we had cases where it was almost 30 degrees, and you think like, yeah, interesting when preparing the next winter. And then also what we do internally, winter roadshows are they called. So we're actually actively going out to our bases and having the conversation with our flight crew in the briefing rooms, and answer any questions that they have in terms of winter operations. Because obviously from our flight deck, we tend to get a lot of questions as well. And this is actually a good opportunity to go out and speak to them face to face, instead of replying just to emails all the time, and building that relationship internally as well. And then the final slide is around the COVID challenges. So obviously, from an airline perspective, I think there's a lot of uncertainty in the current global situation, which affects our schedule. So obviously, we have to take into account flight cancellations, changes, countries opening and closing borders all the time with other countries. So this is actually really difficult. As I said before, we really aim to providing our service providers with our schedule for the winter as soon as possible. But I think this is one of the challenges that we have at the moment, is we don't really know what our schedule is going to look like. We don't even know how our schedule is going to look like in maybe 2 or 3 months of time. Can you imagine, during the winter season itself, into next year? So yeah, we understand that service providers must plan their resources and train their staff, but yeah, it's really difficult, and we can only provide them with a basic indication of how our schedule going to look like. And obviously from an airline perspective, there's a massive focus on de-icing costs. And I think tools like these, like Aftura, like I explained before, really helps us managing better that costs across a network. And then finally, second COVID spike, a third one, we actually don't know. So we live by the day, and we follow the news all the time, and we just have to wait what happens, and that's the thing. So I would say, from our perspective, safety is always first, and I think this can be supported by proper planning, being well prepared, and make sure that we communicate all the time between all relevant stakeholders. So yeah, I'll say thank you for your attention, and obviously I'm happy to take any questions in the course of this webinar.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you very much. And we will share all of the presentations to everyone who's logged on afterwards. Quickly moving it on, so we're running low on time. We've heard about their de-icing strategies. We've heard about stakeholder collaboration, COVID. I'm now going to bring in Sarah, Dr. Sarah Flatty, who has a degree in psychology and expert in human performance and does a lot of work around safety in aviation. Sarah, I was very keen to get your view on the impact on our people of extreme cold, those bracing winds, wind chill factor, and the sort of link there between that stress of extreme cold and decision making, particularly in relation to safety decisions.
Absolutely. Well, if you actually go back to the science, there's a bit of a confusing position, because it would suggest that actually our decision making is worse when we're hot. So on a day like today, when our bodies are trying really hard to cool us down, our bodies are using glucose, and that glucose is being taken away from our brain, and we need that glucose to be able to make some decisions. So actually, you do find that people's decision making improves when it gets colder. So it seems a little bit sort of upside down in that respect. But what we do know is that as soon as your core body temperature starts to drop, then you are much more likely to get distracted. And we also know that the environment in which people are working, there are many more hazards that are out there, from precipitation, ice, you're using chemicals, you're wearing lots of different PPE. And that in itself, the environment in which you're working, can lead to more stress, more fatigue. So people are going to naturally feel tired. And when they feel tired, sometimes their decision making isn't as good as it could be.
And have you got some interest in your comments on, as operators, how we go about the allocation of PPE and protecting workforces who are going to be out, particularly, I guess, it's a different thing in parts of Canada or Scandinavia where you're getting snow regularly, but at stations where you get these, like the UK, snap snow events, and the employees perhaps aren't used to working in those conditions. How do you create that safety culture and give those people the right equipment?
Well, you're right. If you're working in a cold environment all the time, your body adapts. If you live in Arctic conditions all the time, you learn to accommodate that. And there's certain sort of changes to your body shape and size that will occur so that you can live more happily in that environment. What we certainly see in Europe is the up and down and up and down. So it's much more difficult for our bodies to adapt. Typically takes about 2 weeks to adapt to a cold situation. So, we know that people are going to find that a struggle. In terms of the PPE, the only thing that I can really recommend is that it is layered and flexible and allows people to operate optimally in the kind of conditions they find themselves. Unfortunately, what you do see in some locations is people will just buy PPE that is fit for one particular temperature. But we know, because of the variability in the temperature and the types of work that people are doing, they need access to different types of PPE at different times of the year and for different conditions. So I would always advocate layering where you can, because it makes it much more easy for people to take layers off, and therefore to reduce the amount of sweating that seems to occur when you're piling on all the different layers. So what you're trying to do is to regulate your temperature.
Thank you. I'm going to bring in Peter, but please ask any questions you might have for Sarah on that topic in the Q&A, and we'll get to those shortly. Last but not least, I'm going to bring in Peter from Vestergaard. Peter, on that topic of employees, I'll just shift it slightly, and let's hear your views on, Wazeek touched on some of this area around employee training, around de-icing training ready for winter, and particularly the role you see here for simulators, given the constraints that we find ourselves in with physical distancing.
Well, following up on what Wazeek was saying with this presentation for the operator training, we follow the same procedures as his presentation, and then distancing the employees with masks while they're doing both their GSE training and also their operator training. So we're following all of our customers' protocols as we get into the winter season on training them again for the GSE side as well as the operator side. On the simulators specifically, again, the simulators, we've had the simulators since the late 90s. And their function again is no equipment usage, no wear and tear on the equipment usage, to keep the employees up to date on their skills, learn new skills with regards to that equipment, carbon friendly, lack of fuel. And then also with the simulators, you inherently have social distancing since there's only one person per simulator. Again, for winter operations, if we're looking at all the guidelines for protection, we're already using gloves because of the heat of the fluid. We're using masks to protect faces. We're using face shields. All of that's coming into play. With regards to our unit specifically, the cabins, there's a consistent airflow in that cabin to keep the operators warm, more comfortable during the summer if they're training. All the controls are essentially no touch and environmentally sealed, so they can be sterilized and cleaned very easily and quickly. Again, one-man drive. Again, you've got one operator that's running that equipment. So again, that kind of plays into the social distancing. All the controls are sealed, environmentally, so they can all be cleaned and sterilized. Again, for operator recording, going to Peter's presentation a bit, we also have a very complex data transmission system where the units themselves are recording all the data in the de-icing process. And then all that data can be used for the airline or the service provider, going through either Peter's program or an internal airline program for safety or invoicing of customers or monitoring for airport reporting, that kind of thing. So I think we're all, well, again, as a team, we're all moving in the same direction. We listen very intently to what our customers are looking for and what their needs are. And then as an engineering company, we develop solutions to meet those needs.
And I guess that there's a lot of activity right now, given the pandemic, in looking at equipment innovation and adaptation to meet some of the challenges out there.
Yes.
Good stuff. There's a question actually. I'll ask all the panelists if it's possible to get you all back on your cameras. We'll get into some of your questions. And hello, Tassie. We've got a question from Tassie here who says, seeing where the state of aviation is now, it seems from the data that I'm seeing there are lots of layoffs. How many employees are you anticipating needing to train as this progresses? Do you think it's going to be a huge influx at some point, or more of a trickle effect that happens with training the new folks? A volunteer.
Hey, Max, this is Wazeek from Prime Flight. So on the de-icing side, usually with the new employees, a lot of our guys are seasonal employees where we do hire. So we do get to see a lot of influx of recurrent folks coming in as well. But we do anticipate to hire new employees because it is a seasonal job. So we do lose out on replenishing employees that have been there from last season because it's not a full-time gig. It's a seasonal part-time gig. And on the de-icing side, I think with all the de-icing companies as well, the de-icing agent, I don't see any need of issues of layoffs or furloughs because these guys are seasonal. We furlough them in April and then we bring them back in September. And if we need to get more folks in, we actually hire more to ensure that we have enough to run the operation.
Thanks, Wazeek. How about in Europe, Liam? This is something we talked about, I think, but there's a risk that you lose some of this expertise because the person that's got the talent isn't needed from April through to October.
That's correct, and that affects the airport just as much as the airline and of course the company providing that service. So what we did prior to COVID was what we were doing was at the end of the season, we were taking IDS staff over to us and we were using them to enhance ground handling performance. So baggage delivery and even in the security search area. And really the benefits we got from that, when we started to train these guys and then we deploy them really early in the morning to security search, we got to open more machines quicker. And actually our queue time went from an average of about 19 minutes down to about 4 to 6 minutes. So it was just really useful that, you know, we found another way to look at it. So we took those staff, we only took a certain amount of them. We couldn't take everybody, but we took a cut of them. So they did baggage delivery at the end of night so that passengers received their bags quicker on the offloads when the aircraft coming in for night stopping. And then first thing in the morning, they went straight to security search. So everybody benefited. And then come September, those staff were ready for training again. So they just went straight back on the rigs, still doing a little bit of work for us, but back training on de-icing. So once you got to October, these people were ready to go. So a huge benefit.
Thanks, Liam. I'm going to move on to the next question. It's hello, Dave Cross here, who's asked, how are providers looking to overcome the current resource challenges of late airline schedule provision and increasing late changes to airline schedules due to differing recovery policies from national authorities?
Is that for me, is it?
I guess,
Yeah.
and I guess that
Well,
might Justin might have a view on that, but you go first, Liam, if you.
Well, do you know what we were seeing, Max, is that, you know, in terms of ground handling, in terms of staff and stuff like that, that all of our major ground handlers are bringing back nearly all of their staff. So volumes are down, there's no doubt about it. Rotations are down as well. But the number of aircraft that we'll have departing in the morning during August will not be very far off what we were doing on first wave last summer. So those staff are needed. So what we're seeing actually, which was really great news for us, and I guess it's our end of the market, we're low cost. So these guys are, you know, they want to be in the sky. There's nothing for them on the ground, so they want to get going. Your EasyJets and your Wizzes and your Ryanairs. So we've been very fortunate in that these guys are all back to work and nearly everybody back from the 1st of August.
Can technology help there, Peter? If we're talking about late changes and, you know, not knowing where you are and having to react quickly. You mentioned in your presentation traditionally a lot of the work is done manually. Is there a role here, as you mentioned, for more technology to take the strain out of it? Sorry, I should say Peter Hansen there. I've got two Peters. Peter, you're also welcome, Peter Hogg at Vestergaard, to comment on that. I will start using surnames. We've got two of the same. I was talking first to you, Peter Hansen, but then I'll come to you, Peter Hogg, if you want to make a point on that. So if there are late changes in provision, schedules switching at the last minute, how can technology help?
Yeah, I think the benefit of that, and I'll see what Peter Hogg would probably agree or maybe have a different perspective, but definitely it allows you, provides greater visibility in real time and be able, and as a result, to be able to make operational decisions that are not only going to have an immediate impact, but even an impact down the line. So technology definitely has the opportunity to, advance efficiency that way.
Thank you. And Peter Hogg?
I completely agree with Peter Hansen. The technology is helping assist and speed up that process. Again, all the old manual entries or the communication between the tower, the de-icing hour, and the cockpit, a lot of that is changing, and then it's automatically sent to the equipment and reported, and it's speeding up the process significantly. So if there are last minute changes, all those changes can be recorded and specific data input into the system or automatically input and recorded for future use.
Thank you. It's a question here that's pre-submitted by Duncan Holman at DHSL GSE, and he asked, as a result of the coronavirus and the obvious focus on costs, do you see a change in approach regards to aircraft early morning first wave de-icing? Let's go, Liam. Do you anticipate that?
I don't think there's going to be any change. If there's, this will be all based on the number of aircraft on the ground. Airlines are not going to leave their aircraft sitting there till the sun comes up. Certainly not in the UK, because they could be sitting there till 10 or half 10 in the morning. So So they're still going to want to go. So I don't really see that that will bring about a change. You know, I think there'll be, you know, there's going to be a lot of pressure on cost. There's no doubt about that. But I think we'd all agree that we have to provide a certain level of service. And if you don't put it there, then you're going to have to sit and wait till the sun comes up. So that's the choice. And I think we're not left with a lot of choice. I think what we're seeing is fewer rotations of aircraft, but we're still seeing volume of aircraft going at the same time.
Thank you. There's a comment here from David O'Connell, who's just makes the point that you know, have you thought about wireless headsets for training needs, which would obviously comply very well with social distancing up to 150 meters away? They can be used. Is that an opportunity here to adapt that sort of technology given the physical distancing constraints that you touched on, Wazzy?
Yeah, so believe it or not, we actually have certain of our hub stations. We actually have the wireless headsets we're utilizing now, and I think we're looking into pulling these wireless headsets onto other markets, smaller markets, and but that only says that if we have that good connection as well, right? Because having the wireless headset also needs connectivity, and there's some places where, you know, if connectivity is not there, you know, then it becomes a problem solved. But the other issue that I did bring up is that that's where we need to provide the PPP, you know, the wipe downs and the proper protocols after every use. You know, utilizing those same headsets, making sure the crews, they understand that they have to, you know, disinfect these tools, you know, once they're done with it. But the wireless does work. You know, when we have greater connectivity, it works on these big hub stations, and we're also going to probably see if we could get that in use in other smaller markets. And it works well also in open bucket and closed bucket as well. There's a couple of de-icers that we have that are in closed cab and does not require any headset because they have a hot mic in the operator and at the driver pedal as well. But having said that, you know, noise could be also an assurance where it could bog communication. So you know, we are, you know, communicating. I think just like other organization, you know, with getting any type of new productivity and technology in, you know, with the new situation that we're normed in.
And you mentioned 6 feet separations. I mean, that's extended out into activity on the apron around the aircraft, or is it just in internal environments in training exercises, or, you know, how does it translate?
So the 6 feet separation usually goes in. It's actually recommended for indoors and outdoors. But if you're on the outdoor environment, you know, 2 meters, 6 feet, it's a recommended practice. But if you're inside a vehicle, you know, inside of a de-icer, so we would have to have an extra layer of protection, which I brought up that we have a partition in place. So we would have to have that, you know, in that sense, that if we don't have that 6 feet of separation. But on the de-icing world, the bucket operator is actually more than 6 feet away from the driver. And then if you're communicating, you know, with the flight crew, you know, you're either plugging it in or you're using hair-to-ground headset as well. So the interaction, human interaction, is very minimal in the de-icing, you know, world. You know, and so it's not too norm for us. You know, we're actually accustomed to it. But that 6 feet does it goes both ways, outside world and also on indoor activity, you know, and that kind of lessens the burden of getting any type of you know, cultures or anything like that, you know.
It's certainly challenging outside of de-icing, very challenging to apply in a typical turnaround
Exactly. Yeah. So de-icing. So on the de-icing side, the 6 feet is allowed and we could get away with it, but if you're doing ground handling where you have the baggage handler, you have the tug operator, it's hard then, right? Because you have to have that human interaction, you know. But I think a lot of the organization and the airlines here have that safety protocols, you know. Hey, listen, you know, if we can't meet the 6 feet, we have to have other aspects, other safety boundaries, ensuring that, you know, we have those things in place. And I think a lot of the organizations are doing that, you know. But it's crucial if you're in a classroom setting, if you're in any type of a training setting, I think that that 6 feet separation is crucial. But like I said, if you have other safety boundaries, then it's okay to not to have that 6 feet separation. But those things are crucial to have other safety boundaries in place as well. In lieu of that 6 feet separation.
Liam,
I just had a question at Max too, just for the North American guys. A lot of our rigs, they're Malahan, they blend to temperature, forced air blend to temperature, but they're single man operated. Do you guys operate single man rigs and just drive them from the enclosed basket? Do you do that?
Yeah, we do that on the pad setting, but it would normally not be done driving the from the bucket from, let's just say, from the apron all the way to the parking area. We would normally not do that because of a safety hazard. But if it's in the vicinity of the pad area, then yes, the operator could maneuver the truck on the apron without any issue.
Oh,
But it
brilliant.
would, yeah, I wouldn't recommend anyone driving it, 1 mile down the road from yeah, that becomes a safety hazard and internal, hazard for our folks. But around the apron area, it's very advisable, and we do that currently now as well in our industry.
It's one of the things that I was looking at was that, on a pad, you can really limit the movement, so you can actually like choreograph it, if you like, so that the rig is in and back out again and the least amount of movements, because that's the trouble around stands, isn't it? So many movements of the rig. Actually, the movements take longer than the spraying.
You're exactly right.
Liam, from my experience, it's common to see that in North American airports, and especially depending upon the equipment. For example, the equipment that Peter Hogg uses or manufactures, that's very common. And but the one thing it does require, like you said, to have good training, number one, and number two, really set procedures on how that is conducted, to mitigate any potential for incidents, et cetera.
Yeah, that's definitely the route that I'd like to go down and look at that next, because when you time an aircraft, and even on the pad, the movement is usually more of the time than the actual application.
Yeah,
and that's the
setup is critical. Setup is very critical.
There's lots of positive comments here, Liam, about how inspirational the benefits of collaboration that you showed were. I'm just going to throw it back to our audience now, because we're going to ask a question to establish whether you are the exception rather than the rule at Luton, and just ask people to vote on how well they think stakeholder collaboration takes place at their airport. So you should have a poll pop up in front of you, which asks you to rate stakeholder collaboration at your airport when it comes to delivering an effective winter operations strategy. Is it excellent, good, fair, or is it non-existent? Is it very much how Liam describes, or are you at the opposite end of the spectrum? If you want to vote on that now, and just while everyone has their vote, cast their vote on that one, Liam, and everyone really, how do you get that collaboration going? Because we've heard it today on winter operations, we've heard it in our last 2 webinars around responding to this COVID-19 crisis. Everyone seems to concur that we have to work as a team, and all boundaries have to fall. But how do you get it started?
I think, Max, for me, you meet somebody that just inspires something in you. So if we look at Luton, Karen Cox was the lady that brought around this forced air. Ernie Carter was the guy from EasyJet that drove the whole remote de-icing thing. And actually, I always joke with Ernie how much of a pain he was for a couple of years until we actually got remote de-icing. But he was right. He was just one of these guys that wouldn't let it go. And he's done a lot for industry actually through the glycol reclamation and that. So you meet those characters that really stand out. And, when they get your attention, you're just mad not to follow on and follow it up and see what you can do. And we started with nothing. We thought, never was going to happen. Myself and Ernie, we drove around together and discussed it. And I said, Ernie, it's not happening. And he said, well, we've got to try and make it happen. And that was the conversation for about 18 months until we actually found a place to do it. And I think you meet those people. I'm sure the rest of the panelists are the same. They meet people like, I met Sarah many years ago at the Ghost meeting, and just one of those people that strike you that have a lot to offer. And she's done a tremendous amount for us in assisting us with developing a good culture of collaboration. So things happen, and if you pick up on them, I think the opportunity is always there. It's whether you act on the opportunity or not.
Justin, I'd be interested to get your comment on that as well, because obviously EasyJet is very pro-partnership on this topic. What's your advice to others?
So I think it's right what Liam said. I think it just takes meeting one person who's really passionate about the subject and really wants to make it work. And I think we've seen the same as Liam described with other airports, with Manchester, with Reykjavik in Iceland. It just takes the step to go out on the airfield, drive around, look and discuss opportunities on the airfield. And it's just, sometimes it's just a matter of keeping insisting to make sure that things get in place. And sometimes it takes a long time. With some airports, it's taken a couple of years to get it in place. But as I said, during my presence in Southend, for example, we managed to get it in place in the time frame of 6 weeks. So sometimes it's just a matter of insisting and just going out. Come on, let's go on the ramp and have a look at your infrastructure. Is it really true that you can't accommodate such a pad on your airfield? Well, you've got this parking area. What are you doing with it? Well, actually nothing. So can we try it? How much does it cost? A bucket of paint, as Liam has said. So yeah, I think it's really a matter of getting out and having a look together and look at all the opportunities on the airfield.
Thanks, Justin. We've got 10 minutes. I'm going to wrap it up at 25 to, but let's crack on with some questions in that time. So Christopher Rands has a question. With the growing financial and operational strain on ground handling providers becoming apparent due to COVID-19, what detrimental effects will this create, and how can we mitigate undue pressure upon the training, and operational arms to provide the safety critical task?
Well, I'm happy to take a lead on that, Max.
Yeah, go for it.
If COVID-19 has taught us anything, is that when one of us catches a chill, we're all in bed together. And I think, never now, more than any time in aviation history, is collaboration more important. We all hurt together. That's the thing. And I would hope that coming out of this, that we understand that a lot better and that we work more closely. A lot of people have suffered this time around. I think we can and we can do things a lot better. I know that EasyJet have taken a great lead on open book, these kind of contracts that ensure that their partners are partners and not slaves, if you like. And I think we need to go down that road further. Sure, we can be competitive, but we can do a lot for each other. If we create the right environment. Look, we created the largest remote de-icing facility out of nothing because we worked with other people, and it didn't cost an arm and a leg. And I think that this whole thing that if you want to do well, you've got to take it from somebody else is just nonsense. If you want to do well, you've got to include other people, because it's through people that you do well. And if we've learned anything over this period, I hope we take that away and do something with it, because the industry does need it.
Thank you, Liam.
I agree.
Okay, I'm just going to move on to get through some more questions. I have a question here from Buefu. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Regarding some countries, civil aviation regulators do not allow wireless airside, and there's problem with internet connections in others. How could we progress on contactless processes between aircraft crew and the ground handling team during the de-icing or loading task, and how could this be managed in order to make everybody safe and prevent spreading the virus during extreme weather, snow, etc.? Peter.
Yeah, I think, we understand, globally, generally speaking, there's not an issue with, broadcasting of wireless signals on an airport environment. However, that reality does exist. We know that. So that could be a combination of, limitation on using mobile devices, or limitation on broadcasting wireless signal. like Wi-Fi. Really, two mechanisms. There are platforms that can be utilized that can capture verbal or communication, whether it's by radio, VHF, UHF, and allow that to be used to communicate with one another outside of Wi-Fi. The other one too is really, I can't speak for all software companies that provide these services. I just know within our own platforms, if there is a limitation on transmission of data, that the hardware or the software platforms can be operated still with input, and then at a time when they have access to to a Wi-Fi signal, or they're able to broadcast data, that basically the information that is in the programs can be uploaded at that time. It's not real time, it's not ideal, but nevertheless the data is not necessarily lost. The only limitation is it may not be in real time. So there are mechanisms to address that. We've come across that in a few locations.
Thanks, Peter. This one probably, I think you may have answered part of this, but Philip Davies asked, are OEMs providing de-icer activity to ops teams in real time, or are you more relying on third-party data providers, telematics, software, etc., to extract and report this information across a mixed fleet?
Peter Hansen or Peter Haug?
Sorry,
I think you
get used to this, haven't I? Peter Hansen, that one.
Okay.
Yeah, well, Peter Haug could answer it too. I think so. Basically, I want to say both. Yes, it is possible. I'll let Peter speak to it, because he's very familiar with it too from an equipment perspective.
I was going to say that the data is being captured real time, but the rate of transmission depends on the network of the airport to see if it's going to be transmitted real time or if it's pulsed out every minute or 5 minutes, because there's a cost involved in the transmission from the equipment to the airport management. So depending on how that infrastructure is put into place and what the cost is, or the need or the value of the data, that determines how quickly it's transferred between parties.
Thank you both, Peters. Talhar Goxel asks, a collaboration of service providers will be very efficient in de-icing services, but how will insurance companies approach the issue if damage occurs during providing those activities?
I suppose I'm the best person to answer that.
Yeah, I was going to say with pooling. Yeah.
We pool equipment, and that was one of the big issues about pooling. Is where does the liability lie? Well, the liability lies with the user at the time, and that's it. So if you cause damage to an airframe, whether it's shared equipment or not, you're the company that caused it, and the liability is with you. It's we went through the same thing with glycol reclamation. Picking up off floors. Actually, the law says the contaminator is liable for the cleanup. So that's the approach that we took to it. So you're always liable, and your insurance company knows that. So whether you're sharing equipment or not doesn't matter. You're operating at the time. You do a pre-use check. You're satisfied it's good to go. And with us, we have telematics and everything. So the minute you swipe, you're saying that this piece of kit's fit for use. And anything happens after that is really, if it's not a defect of the equipment, it's really down to you.
Thanks, Liam. We've got a couple of minutes left. Question, it touches on something, Justin, you mentioned in your presentation, but we're talking about, you really need to have started your discussions around winter operations now. But how difficult might that be for handlers talking to airlines, perhaps given everything that is going on and the state of flux and strain that is on the system? How do you get your voice heard, and is there a potential risk here that an airline won't really want to be talking about winter ops if they're in the thick of COVID-19?
Yeah, it's definitely difficult, and the approach we take at EasyJet is, as I said before, make sure we have, with the relationships we almost have a daily conversation with our de-icing service providers, and obviously from our internal perspective, where we're monitoring on a daily basis what's happening in the world, what restrictions are being put in place. So it is very hard to predict the future. It's already difficult normally during a normal winter season, let's say, to predict what's happening and advise the service providers of what's coming. So it definitely is difficult, but I think having a good relationship with your de-icing partners, with airports, etc., really helps in maintaining that contact and communication going. So although it's not easy to deliver information to those service providers, at least keeping the conversation and communication going might just help a little bit, and you can probably react quicker if you have a good relationship and are in constant communication. So yeah, that's probably the only thing that I would suggest: have good and regular communication with your partners.
Any one more comment on that, if anyone wants to? Come in?
You've got no volunteers.
No volunteers. No volunteers. Well, let's go then to the results of our poll, if we can get the technology to work. So we asked you around stakeholder collaboration. That's quite encouraging. So we had sort of most popular answer. 51% said collaboration was good. They're proactive. They've got a plan. Could do better. So 24% said excellent when it comes to winter operations, which is some good scores there. And only what have we got there? Sort of just under 25%ish saying fair or non-existent. So encouraging, gentlemen and ladies. If not a little bit of room for improvement as ever.
Yeah, Max, I think what we're seeing, and I'm speaking not just from a technological perspective, but I think we're seeing, over the last 5 to 10 years, but definitely the last 5 years, and especially now this year, in light of the COVID situation, that there's a real, call it a paradigm shift going on within aviation, where everyone is looking for the next advantage and the next efficiency, and there really is a collaboration going on and a real initiative to make it work, and I think that's great. And I think it'll serve the industry well, into the future. And we're what's going on in Great Britain, will somehow benefit another part of the world, and conversely. So it's to me it's an exciting time, albeit a challenging but exciting.
Yes. The worst of times and the best of times. But it certainly is a big opportunity here, as we've heard on all the other webinars. We've heard it again today around the importance of teamwork and working together, no matter which part of the supply chain you represent.
Yeah.
Indeed. Well, I'm going to stop short of asking you for weather forecasts for this winter, because it's still a bit long range. But I guess it would be typical if it was a harsh winter on top of everything else, and I guess prepare for the worst and hope for the best. But thank you all very much for your time today. Thank you all for logging in and submitting your questions. We'll send around all of the presentations from our panelists, try and get those ones out to you tomorrow. We've got a feedback survey coming round, so let us know your thoughts. And great to have a forum to speak to our delegates again and speak with you guys and spread the word. We'll have our next webinar in 2 weeks' time. It's on the 13th of August, and we're looking at cargo, the great cargo opportunity. We've seen so many temporary cabin conversions, and there's been a real interest in air cargo, so we'll be exploring that in more detail. So do log on and join us in a couple of weeks' time. But for now, thank you all very much. Have a good evening, have a good day if you're from North America. And it's been a pleasure. Thank you all. Take care, and we'll see you all again soon. Thank you.
Thanks,
Okay, all the best.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.